Wonderful. Well, I will call this meeting to order. And we are operating still under the continuing resolution that was adopted in the May 2020 meeting for emergency procedures. We have minutes to deal with from two meetings. The first was the May regular board meeting. Does anyone have any comments or concerns about those draft minutes that were sent around? If not, I'll ask for any nays for accepting those. If someone can move to accept those minutes.
So moved.
Thank you. Are there any nays for accepting those minutes? I hear no nays, so it's a unanimous acceptance. We also have a brief set of minutes for the closed meeting that was held for the director evaluation earlier this month. There was one change that I thought we ought to make in those minutes just for clarity, and that's to take out the fact that David was present at the meeting, because although he was there to set up the meeting, he was not there during the discussion. So I thought it was just clearer that way. But with that change, would those minutes be acceptable to the board? Thank you. Are there any nays for accepting those minutes with the change of leaving David's name as present off? Thank you. So those are accepted. I'm assuming that we need to leave out Kathy and Lisa because they were not at the meeting, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, for the special session,
For
correct.
the special, Lisa was there.
Lisa
Tony was only there, not there at the very end of the meeting. So I guess it's just Kathy. All right, thank you very much. We do have some announcements. I wanted to make a brief announcement so that it was read into the record about the results of the director's evaluation earlier this month. Comments were discussed with David by Thomas and myself last week. In general, the board was extremely thankful for David's service and his excellent work in keeping the library moving forward safely throughout the last very difficult year. The board also recommended that he be given a 2% raise, as is requested for the entire staff. And so that was the outcome of that meeting. I also have an announcement that I'm very excited about. Alita Childs is here with us today at the meeting. Alita is the new Nelson representative for the Board of Trustees. She has a long history of working in education, especially as a speech pathologist, and with children with special needs. She is retired from those positions, although I know that she has been, until very recently, still substitute teaching in the Nelson County Public Schools. She also was a very active member of the award-winning Roe Nelson Library fundraising committee. And she is a very valued library patron, and now will be, I think, you will find a very valued library trustee. Thanks, Alita. Welcome.
Welcome, Alita.
Welcome. Thank you so much.
Are there any other announcements from other board members? David?
After one.
I don't know if this is the correct place, but I did want to share that I did do one of the webinar shops for library trustees, and the one that I thought was the best was the one on advocacy. You'll go as well.
I wasn't able to attend, but I have the recording. So I'm hoping
It's worth watching.
Yeah.
The first one was a little slow, but I got some really good ideas, and I thought I would just print up some notes and send you some that I thought were valuable about reaching out to the community and certain things that we could actually do and bring into our meetings, because I'm talking about internal as well as external advocacy. And one of the things that David had just done when I took the webinar was, it was obvious. You had sent the note around from a letter from the woman thanking, or a patron thanking the library staff during COVID and what effect it had on them. And that was one of the most common ideas for sharing information in-house, but also getting those messages out. So there were some good ideas, so I'll wait to see if you listen, or otherwise I'll just put up some notes. But I do have a lot of ideas. Okay.
Good,
Thanks.
David, you have, was there another announcement?
No, I want to thank David for reminding me.
Sure. Actually, Marcy, if you don't mind, I have two announcements.
Good.
So first, it's my great pleasure to introduce you all to JMRL's new business manager, AJ Mosley. AJ, you want to stand up and get in the spotlight here?
How did I miss
Come to the center of the auditorium.
that?
Front and center. AJ brings nearly a decade of experience in executive leadership in the nonprofit sector. He most recently served on the senior leadership team for a network of churches where he oversaw the operations and finances for the organization. And prior to that, AJ served in the office of the Associate Vice President for Business Services at JMU. He claims to be very excited to be part of the JMU.
So far, so
So AJ, welcome. Welcome to the library program. You'll be joining us monthly.
Good to have you.
Nice meeting everybody.
Good to have you.
Welcome.
Welcome.
And then I come bearing gifts for Marcy for her time of service at JMRL. Start the meeting with some fun.
This is going to be very hard.
What?
It's going to be very hard without you.
Oh, that's so sweet.
Marcy, thank you for your service to JMRL. And then there's a book for each year of your time on the board here, lovingly selected with help from the Nelson Memorial Library staff. Each one goes to Nelson and has a nameplate in honor of Marcia McDuffie for years of service, 2015 to 2021.
Wonderful.
So thank you so much for all you've done for JMRL.
I told David that this has been one of the most satisfying things I've done in my life, so that's a good way to leave.
But I'll miss you. And there is an open invitation to anybody who wants to come down and see sheep running the field. Just let me know. All right, we do not have trustee continuing education for this particular meeting because of the other business that we needed to attend to. But our first order of business is to elect our fiscal year 22 officers. So Carla, could you?
Sure. So as I mentioned in the last meeting, I just wanted to say thank you to Marcy and to Wendy for their many years of service and leadership on our board, more than just 1 year. And we really appreciate the time that you committed to the board above and beyond just being a trustee. So thank you so much to both of you. Thomas Unsworth has agreed to serve as our next president, and Wendy Craig has agreed to serve again as our as another year as our vice president. So that is the slate of officers I'm presenting, and I think we just vote on it. Is that correct?
Yes.
Motion.
Yeah. If someone could move that we elect Thomas Unsworth as president and Wendy Craig as.
So moved.
Thank you very much, Kathy. Shall I go do a voice vote then here? Carla?
Yes.
I will also vote yes. Mike?
Yes.
Wendy?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
Thomas, would you like to vote?
I was just wrestling with that one.
Asking you.
What does an abstain say? I'll vote yes. Thank you. Thank you all very much.
Tony?
Yes.
Kathy?
Yes.
Lisa?
Yes.
Thank you very much. It's unanimous, and I would like to express the appreciation of the board for your willingness to serve I'm sure it's going to be a great year. Now, I would like to turn the meeting over to Thomas, the new president, and I will sit down and be quiet.
Thank you, Marcy, and I'm sorry, guys, that I can't be there in person, taking advantage of our last opportunity here to enjoy a Zoom meeting. I don't want to stay too long off of the agenda, so let me just for now say thank you all very much. I will do my best with the responsibility you put on me, and I hope that you all are ready for helping to share that load, because I will be relying on all of you a great deal. Director's goals, David, would you like to take this away?
Sure, thank you. Thomas, I presented 3 goals in your handouts for fiscal year 22. These are the items that I've identified either out of the strategic plan or out of the state of the world as being the most important things for myself to focus on. I will screen share them briefly. Pardon the rapid scroll. The first is to steer JMRL through the library's COVID response plan and begin to implement the lessons learned about staffing, safety, and services for the long-term future of the organization. So that goal comes with the belief and understanding that we will see the other side of the COVID response plan at some point, hopefully within the next year. So really, as I think about this for myself, it's prepping for tier 0, but planning for worst case scenarios in case JMRL has to step back up the tier system this year. So as with all of these, this is not really an individual goal, it's an organizational goal. I think our staff really has done an amazing job throughout the last year or year and several months of being able to offer high-level library service, even with the limitations we face. So I expect more of the same throughout the year, and I think that it's the biggest goal ahead of JMRL and most other institutions. The second goal there is to secure the board's approval for our minimum wage adjustment plan and begin to work to implement this with JMRL's jurisdictions. So the process there is that I will bring proposals to the budget committee and then to the full board and then to the jurisdictions. I'm going to begin preparing the jurisdictions prior to the budget process that this is coming. So we all know, I believe, that a $15 minimum wage is state law by 2026. And staff have been working on plans for getting there ahead of schedule, and we'll need the support of this board and our jurisdictions to make it happen. So this will involve a lot of communication on my part, on your part, and also teamwork to get there. And the final identified goal is to present to this board JMRL's diversity plan, which is a 5-year plan goal to the library board. The first step there is to identify needs organizationally. The second is to set priorities and goals. And the third is to set up a system of accountability for this plan so that it's not an empty document and has specifics in it that says who will do what at what time. So those are the 3 things that I'm looking forward to focusing on fiscal year 22, although the actual priority list is like a million things. So these are just the really important ones amongst many others.
Does anybody have any thoughts they want to share?
It looks to me as if this is going to be a really busy year again for David as well as for the staff supporting. But they look like the kinds of goals that we absolutely have to have for the system to keep moving forward. So I'm really excited to see them.
So I would throw on the table one topic that's been kicked around a little bit is my understanding is there's some time sensitive advantages right now that maybe some others can speak to, but it would be to try and take some concrete steps, which would be initial steps towards moving a central renovation forward. And I think I'll put on the table, we could maybe turn one into a background task, because I know it's some overhead you'll be dealing with. But if we can define some specific steps in terms, I'd heard mentioned, revisiting the existing plan and figuring out how to get that to be into a new state where it's ready to start attaching some numbers to and move the process forward. Is there a chunk of that for the room? is there interest in defining a chunk of that and committing to it in this format in terms of a director goal as something we'd like to see happen concretely this year? And if,
Because I think, when we got off track last time, and this was, discussed, it was when you say timely in the sense of having funding from the, one of the.
I think there was a sense,
We
yeah,
might get some money from, reimbursement or
Well, I think-
money or.
again, if there's others that can speak to it better.
Okay.
But yeah, we're saying the same thing. There's a sense that there is some infrastructure funding right now that's not normally there. And that there may be a window of opportunity to get some of these sort of planning that we would need as first steps funded.
And you think that that should be one of the rector's goals, or should we propose, the board propose it another? What do you guys think? A little bit about.
I like the concept of the board to answer that. David's goals are
That's not
monumental in
enough.
themselves, right? I like what Mike's saying. I think this is the right time, probably. It's iffy, but probably. But certainly could be some of the board. could pursue.
I think, I was one of the people who spoke to this in previous discussions, that we do have an existing plan that's quite old and will need to be relooked at. And so, is that something we should be doing now and trying to get funding to help us develop a new plan for central renovation? And then also to look at, so when central is renovated, we will not be able to use that building as a library. So that would be the other thing, is to really look at what does that entail in terms of moving the site? What facilities are available in the next coming years? And so to develop a plan, and perhaps use funding to have an organization that can help us develop a plan, both in terms of a redesign for central and to move the actual facility.
But I think the part of the context there is if and when we're ready to move forward, it's gonna have to be from the basis of an updated plan.
Yes,
Right.
definitely.
So a step, if the time is good, and I'm open to people saying that there's reasons why it is or is not a good time. If the time is good, can we identify that as a step? And then, as Jim is saying, is there a board volunteer who would be able to kind of spearhead that, or would it normally be, when we get to it, because I know it is in our 5-year plan, would that end up being staff-led, i.e. director-led,
I say
yeah.
two new people. We haven't started. Right.
I think it's something we'd all love to see happen, but I'm wondering if this is a way,
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I couldn't-
No.
I think, Mike, from my perspective, it depends on what kind of deliverables you're seeking within a year. Is it a realistic thing that we would have a funding commitment from the jurisdictions involved to renovate the central library next year? Like, I do not want that to be my goal.
Correct. No,
And I don't think that's what we're
I
saying.
absolutely agree, and I was trying to phrase that initially. We would have to define a reasonable step. But the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a
Sure.
single step, and
So-
that would be the spirit.
What we have most recently is a design concept from an architectural firm that is about 5 years old at this point. That is not an A&E plan, bricks and mortar, a shovel-ready project. So it does not have the schematics available to say, yes, here's money, start tomorrow, or put it out to bid right now. It is merely a design concept at this point. With costing that's associated that our business manager, 2 business managers ago came up with. So that is the number that we have been using with the city of Charlottesville and Albemarle County in their CIP plans. This is an unfunded request on both ends because it's a 50-50 owned building, the two of them. So I would suggest concrete steps that I think this board and myself could take would be to take that plan back to the architects and say, okay, here's what's changed since then, because there've been, all the restrooms at Central have been renovated. There's a new chiller on the building. So presumably there are some savings that come along with that. We wouldn't add a new chiller if we could renovate in a few years. So I would ask for an update to that plan and then to maybe get a cost on what an A&E plan would cost. When Jay Morrell received the donation from the Swigert estate a few years ago, the former business manager and I approached the city and asked about the possibility of using that funding to get an architecture and engineering plan drawn, which are six-figure tickets, in the hopes that it would be a shovel-ready project so that when money came available, it would go. And at that time, we were told there's no point because by the time this is shovel-ready, that will be out of date. You will have lost your six figures there. So identifying whether or not that's still the case. And I believe that, and we've talked about this with the Friends before as well. When Tony was on the Friends board, we talked about this, getting together a group of citizenry and members of Albemarle and Charlottesville, staff or public officials or elected officials to discuss this and to try and work out, to try and get some political capital behind them. All those seem like very measurable, doable things in the next year.
And I think that
Is
is,
it possible to discuss a plan where they don't have to move completely? It can't be done in phases. And I know this is jumping the gun.
I think it's all on the table right now, Kathy. I think that certainly, if that would, I think the idea is always that costs more money and takes longer. If you don't do it all at once, it's like if you're doing the plumbing, you got to do all the plumbing, rather than this part or that part. But effectively, it has been piecemeal over the last few years. The new restroom renovations went in. So maybe it's time to pick and choose things that are out of the architectural design and say, well, this we want, and can we make that happen? This is a priority. So it's possible.
I only think sympathetically, as someone who has had to move a building, that's going to be really tough on the staff to organize, and well, we'll see.
That certainly would be a big undertaking.
Yes.
That we have had staff do before, but it's usually when they're moving into a new building. Nelson just went through a renovation while they were still in the building there, so.
But they had a new space too.
They had some space.
They didn't have to reuse the current space.
There's not, unfortunately, we're not gonna get a parking garage under the central library.
David,
So-
go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead there.
I was just going to ask, with some of the steps you were outlining, do you envision ultimately that there will be a fundraising, a third-party fund raising effort like we saw with Nelson?
Yeah, I think that would be required.
I mean, so that could also be a step, start lining up. I think there's enough, what's the right word to say? There's enough potential funders, perhaps privately, just within, that's just the fortune that we have in this community. If we could start turning some of those into what look like more concrete pledges, that might also help for this kind of the CIP process down the line. So I might put that on the list of concrete steps, is just establish that as a real, something we talk about into a real organization.
Pledges,
Perhaps, I don't know.
what we've learned,
Yeah.
Nelson and Prose, what Jay Morrell has learned, is that until you have the backing of the political bodies, it's
Yeah.
hard to get somebody to say, yeah, sure, I'll give you this money in the hopes that someday you need to have a commitment from the localities that this.
It's kind of a
project
chicken
is
and
happening.
egg,
Yeah, exactly.
almost, yeah.
Yeah, it is, that's a good way to put it. We ran into that in both those building projects. But once it happens, then the fundraising follows.
But putting together the committee
Yeah, that's a very doable.
and starting to use that kind of political pressure, I think, could
Thank
be really useful.
Thank you, Marcy. That's exactly what I was going to get to. I think recognizing the interest and to a degree the urgency in getting the ball rolling on this, I still have some hesitance in modifying the prioritized list of objectives, just because I like where this sits as a very sort of high level overview of what we expect from David without getting too much into the micromanaging of how each of these things gets accomplished. Would it suffice to leave it off of this list for now with the understanding that we can look at directing some committee work and resources to starting to put those action items in order? But one of my other kind of hesitations here is, with so many potential first steps on the table, a lot of different ways that this could go and a lot of work that needs to get done to get started on it, I wonder if it's not more efficient for us to start this at a committee level and start putting the work and the resources into it to narrow that list and organize it before we escalate this to the level of, we expect something to be done here within the year, David.
Well, Thomas, while you were talking, I did pull up the 5-year plan goal, which is already, I have 2 days to accomplish. In fiscal year 21, create a work group comprised of trustees, staff, friends of the library, community members, Charlottesville and Albemarle staff to plan and advocate for the renovation of the central library. So certainly that seems like a very deliverable goal for the organization next year. And the only reason that didn't happen last year was because of COVID.
So could we amend the list of objectives then to include that? Would that feel
That's
like
fine
a
with me.
comfortable
I mean,
starting place for everybody?
That's already an identified goal.
Board members, does that meet the need that we've expressed here?
Sounds good.
Okay.
Yeah, if we're, as a group, wanting this to happen, and we're sort of pointing it out as a priority for ourselves, at least, it doesn't make a lot of difference to me whether it's on David's list or not at that point. But yes, there will have to be a group of volunteers who are ready to do some stuff.
And we do have a new city trustee coming on board as well, so I think we would need at least one county trustee and one city trustee.
Sure.
And I would just mention that I think we should use resources that are available to us, like the CAC app.
Yeah.
And to talk to them about, hey, this is gonna be a goal for us. And what are other outside funding sources that might be open for grants, and also individual donors who might be interested.
And Tony, weren't you involved in that previously?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, the original plan dates from the late 90s. It was done by Kirk Train, who's still in business in Charlottesville, and was quite a extensive plan. And Kathy, it did have the entire building moving out for up to a year. At that time, they were thinking they would move to the Jefferson School, which was empty at that point. And then renovate the building, everybody would move back in. And we did do some preliminary work with the Friends. We had a committee, but as David points out, really the thing that needed to happen and really happened in Crozet, of course, you get the jurisdictions on board, and then the jurisdictions say, yes, but we need another grant, another $1.5 million. Then you start the fundraising. And that's when things really get going.
So David, do you need a motion from us on the list of objectives?
I don't think so. I think I can just add it in there and make sure we get it in the notes.
Okay.
And when I talk about, I'll add it to my personal list, and then when we talk about it at mid-year, there'll be 4 instead of 3.
And that was goal number 6, objective number 2 off the
Correct.
5-year plan. Okay, great. Thank you very much. Before we move on, is there anything else anybody would like to say on the matter? Okay, then moving right along, we have ARPA funding up next. David, I'll turn it right back over to you.
Okay, well, speaking of funding, so the ARPA, the American Recovery Protection Act funding, did include funding that went to the State Library of Virginia that is now granting it out to all libraries in the state of Virginia on using the same formula that they use to calculate state aid. So JMRL receives the second largest amount of state aid in Virginia, so we are, it's available to us to get $95,459 to use by the end of September 22, so throughout next fiscal year. And there are several kind of caveats to the ARPA funding. That the initial funding there said basically it has to be a COVID-related expense of some sort, and there were ways to make that work for libraries, but they were a little bit more limited. What the state is using is a clause that says to support library services that meet the needs of communities throughout the U.S., including costs such as personnel, technology, training, materials, supplies, equipment, and associated indirect costs. Now, the state made it very clear that although this says personnel, it is not to include personnel, because that would mean the state having to report personnel funding to the federal government, which they don't currently have the capacity to do. They also made it very clear that this could not go towards bricks and mortar projects. So it couldn't go towards build this thing unless that was a COVID related thing. It couldn't be part of your building. So for instance, if we were going to, at Ginny's library, build a stage, maybe outside for programming, then that would be a cost. But if we were to say, come inside to the little steps that are here and recover them or something like that, that would likely be denied. So it's important that we identify areas to spend this money that will serve all JMRL jurisdictions also. So it can't be that we would just spend all this money on one of our individual branches. The crux here is that the project plans and applications are due to the state by July 28th, 2021. So by the end of next month. So we could have one more board meeting. We will have one more board meeting before that time in which I could present an entire proposal to you. Unfortunately, this information all came through last week. I knew it was on the horizon, but didn't realize the scope of it until we got the numbers. So we could treat this as a grant, and the policy is that the board must approve accepting grant funds. I think that's the best way to move forward here. My preliminary proposal, which you all can discuss and point me in whichever directions you like. And what I will do is take the state's documentation and send it out to you all this afternoon so that you can take a look and see what, they have some good proposed ideas in there and some things that they've talked to other libraries about. But the preliminary proposal is to split funding into 3 areas. The first of which is to cap off the 20% of costs for new networking equipment that E-rate will not pay for. So when we discussed the equipment budgets that's appended to the budget that you all are going to vote on today, there's a whole section where JMRL for the first time is going to apply or has already applied for category 2 funding for network equipment, and basically to redo all of our network equipment throughout the system. The federal government reimburses that at 80% of the costs. So this grant could potentially pick up that other 20%, which would be approximately $27,000. I am also very interested in adding exterior holds pickup lockers to several locations. So my thinking was Green, Louisa, and Nelson, and perhaps one in the urban area here, and then also maybe talking to the Friends of the Library family of funds to help see if we could also look at Scottsville and Crozet as well. That, though, is going to require having some specific quotes and some data on how much that's going to cost, which we don't have on hand yet. So hopefully we can get that by the 28th. If not, the state might cut us a little bit there. And finally, to use the remainder on overdrive materials, which is in line with some of the goals of the ARPA. Although, as Marcy points out, for our folks that are in broadband dearth, it doesn't help them per se. So it provides a lot of access to the whole region, but still is an equity question at times. So the reimbursement's on a receipt basis throughout the year, which is not ideal, but certainly manageable. There's nothing to vote on yet for the board. I wanted you all to be aware and familiar with this. I'll send those guidelines out this afternoon. Staff will start working on a grant proposal, which I can get to you in advance of your July meeting, and then we could discuss it in July. If it's ready at that point, we'll submit it. If not, we'll go back to the state and say we need some time on this.
You would know in advance whether a project had been approved.
Yes, we would check with the state in advance to make sure that the costs, all those things that I described, the only one I had a question about was the E-rate, the reimbursement, and I already asked and they okayed it. So all the rest of them are well in line. If there are, however, things that you identify when you read the materials that haven't occurred to staff, then please send them my way and we'll take a look and see what's possible.
Thank you. Any other thoughts on that before we move on? Okay, well, thank you, David. We'll hear back from you next month with specifics on some of the costs there, and I guess we'll approve that as a grant in the July meeting.
Actually, I think that the policy says we approve it once it's been received, so it depends on when we hear back from the state that they approve it, so probably it wouldn't be till August.
Okay, wonderful. All right, well, moving forward in our agenda, committee appointments and reports. We have done appointments. Policy committee had a meeting right beforehand. Do you guys have a report?
I do. Can I find that page? Okay, yes. We discussed 3 policies today. One was, I think I've mentioned, well, the first 2 I think I've mentioned at the last meeting. And these came out of the employee handbook working group, things that we have identified. So we have a new discrimination policy that was applied to us by council and recommended to us by council. And we had a few topics we wanted to discuss, and we've made some changes. I'm not going to show you today because we'd like to, having changed wording from the lawyer, we'd like to run it back by him before we show it to you. So, but I think we will be able to, the committee is ready to recommend it if there's no changes that come from council. So we may well be able to present that at the next meeting. Similarly, we worked on a religious accommodation policy, and that's more of a workplace thing, but we wanted to have it at the policy level. A lot of it is covering existing law and sort of encapsulating some of those bullet points into something that we're committing to at the policy level. That also, we have language that the committee is now comfortable with recommending, but we want to run that by the staff, the managers in particular, since they're going to be the ones essentially implementing that. Because it applies to what JMRL offers or commits to regarding how we interact with employees. So it's some ability that employees have. So again, I think the idea is the committee's ready to, if there's, we may or may not, depending on what the managers say, we may or may not see the language of that next month, but that's in the works, so let me put it that way. And then last we discussed something from our regular review schedule, which as we know is each policy gets looked at every 10 years. So this is one that was up for regular review, and that is disposal of library equipment. Just to take a little right-hand turn here into some different type of territory. And we talked about just having a little more, if you see this, so the committee is ready to recommend this language that you see in front of you. So this could perhaps be a first reading, and then you'll receive this in your handouts for a more specific review and potential vote at the next board meeting. But it's really just giving us a little more, this is something that David discussed with the business managers, and they just wanted to make sure we had there was sort of a must-do type of thing, and it's well, actually, it referred to a specific venue or sale vehicle, and in fact, sometimes that's applicable, sometimes it's not, and so instead of Charlottesville specifically working through equipment sale, we'll work through their list of procedures, which may or may not include equipment sale, but also is kind of has a more detailed kind of a priority list of other options, and that's the substance of the change there. Any questions about any of those 3 topics? All right, so again, we'll see the first 2 in the future, and we'll see disposal of library equipment, I believe, this at the next meeting for a possible vote.
So if I could just clarify with you then, the other two may be in July, maybe later, depending on feedback.
Correct.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. With no other committee reports on our agenda, we'll cruise right along to old business. And we have a policy to vote on. David or Michael, do you want to introduce this?
So this one we saw a couple months ago and got some great feedback from the board, which we took back to the committee. And this is the result. And I think we read this or introduced it last month and it was in your handout. So it's basically clarifying that, and this is similar, the goal was to parallel some new language that we recently adopted with gifts. And that is that portraits are essentially at the discretion of the director, whether it's an existing portrait or a new one. And then he'll use his judgment to bring some case by case potentially to the board for approval of any removal or addition. We wanted to say, kind of make a statement that generally for new gifts and donations, we're not very interested in having more portraits or new portraits. And we would, if there were a proposal for a gift that involved a portrait, that we do have a policy that we would refer back to. Clarification that exhibits are not portraits. And then similarly, for staff members, we do want to recognize staff member contributions in some key cases, but generally those are also not going to be with portraits, but with other methods, which we have a different policy for. So that's the update.
Thank you. I don't know why I didn't think of this in the last meeting, but looking at it here today, one thing that jumps out to me is temporary exhibit defined somewhere else in the policy manual.
No, I don't
Probably,
think so.
there is an exhibits policy, but I doubt that it gets into, is your question about how long the time?
Well, just if we refer, I'm looking at that one line and if I were somebody who wanted to know if something was a permitted portrait or not, and I was looking for a definition, I would look for temporary exhibits. I don't want to get this hung up on that. I think that that's pretty self-explanatory what it means. It was just a curiosity that popped into my head. Okay, any other questions? Great. Are we ready to make a motion on this?
So moved.
Thank you, Marcy.
I'll second it.
Thank you. All in, David, do we need a voice vote on this one?
I think you can always go all in favor. It just depends on if you want to make sure Ginny gets the right information for the minute.
All in favor?
Yes.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we will pass that by unanimous consent. Thank you all very much. Moving along, our fiscal year 22 budget. David, do you want to pull this up? I'll do a little walkthrough.
Sure.
Let's see, where are my notes?
I'm looking for our board handouts. Pages 8 through 32. And Thomas, the only changes that came from the time the board discussed this last month were the adjustments that were made in the equipment fund to remove funding for a few items at Nelson that are going to be paid for by the Grow Nelson Library fundraising, and then also the landscaping at Green, which we're going to look to the endowment for, with the understanding that should the endowment not fund that, it would come back to this body to discuss for the library board.
Absolutely, thank you. And that covers about what I would have recapped on this. I think we all, well, let me just say, are there any questions on the budget? Any particular or general questions about this? I think we've been over it a couple of times, and we, as David just said, had the discussion about the equipment budget last month. Any last minute thoughts or concerns from anyone? Well, then are we ready to make a motion?
Move, so move. We adopt the budget.
Thank you, Wendy. I think that was it. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Jim. And let's do a voice vote on this one. It is our budget. Marcy,
Aye.
Carla,
Yes,
Wendy,
Yes,
Michael,
Yes.
Tony,
Yes.
Jim,
Aye.
Kathy,
Yes,
Lisa,
Yes.
and I will vote yes as well. Did I miss anybody? Sorry, my first voice vote. Okay, well, thank you all very much. The motion will pass. And finally, David, COVID response plan update.
Certainly, thank you. So JMRL is currently in tier 2 of our COVID-19 response, moving next week down to tier 1, which is next week, yes, July 6th. The major change between tier 1 and tier 2 is scaling back up of some services. So meeting room availability, we begin taking registrations for meeting rooms starting on the 6th, plus some other services, especially notaries, which I know this group has talked about quite a few times. So all branches will return to pre-pandemic schedules. So most of them are at full hours, but schedules have been shifted a bit. We should be able to look at the signs that are posted outside and have them match reality after next week, which is a boom. Otherwise, staff have been largely operating in that same environment for the last, since your last meeting in tier 2. Staff continue to report positive interactions with the public, very good feedback about services, people that are happy to be back in the building, but also are like to take a moment to thank library staff for providing the services while the buildings weren't as fully open. The next sticky wicket for library staff to figure out is programming, how to safely offer programming for all ages. Some adult programming will return to in-person right away. We have a few book clubs that have been chomping at the bit to get back into library meeting rooms, and we'll begin meeting in tier 1 meeting rooms. Staff have been working on some outdoor children's programming. We had a very successful story time at the park next to Central Library last week with 30+ people. And the EPC and the children's programmers are working on guidelines for transitioning for programming with the hopes to have a full slate of programs. And what that will look like, we're not quite sure yet. Those guidelines haven't been developed. There are a lot of concerns. One of the challenges is how to safely offer programming that's going to be available for children in an environment where, that not everybody who's in the library may or may not be vaccinated. So we're working on some guidelines to make that happen and make it safe as possible for staff. Again, our virtual programming, JMRL's virtual programming has been so successful that it's not like we can just turn that off and flip a switch and go back to the pre-COVID programming. So it's finding a balance here. Our JMRL staff does not have to reinvent or invent the wheel, I guess, in this case. We can rely on our peers. We can try some things and be prepared to fail as long as we do so safely and try and figure out the best way forward to offer programming. And then masks is the final thing I wanted to mention. With the state of emergency ending this week on the last day of the month, JMRL is going to change staff language on masking to requested not required in public areas, which is the same language that we're using for the public right now to match our tier 2 wording for the public. This is a change from the earliest versions of tier 1, basically because even though locally, at least in Charlottesville, Albemarle, there will be no prosecution of masks wearing, it's still the law on the books says that it is illegal, and JMRL should not, cannot tell employees, mandate that employees do something illegal. So we're going to request mask wearing in public areas, but not require.
I would just like to modify that a little bit. The way that law is actually written is that for health reasons, masks can be used.
Great.
And so it's not, I think we don't have to be apologetic about recommending that masks be worn.
Sure.
And as I told David last week, I did confirm with the county attorney in Nelson that there would be no prosecutions for anyone who wore a mask related to COVID. The law was trying to inhibit activities of the Ku Klux Klan. It's been a while, and that's not what these masks are doing. So I think you can encourage people that this is not something that's breaking the law.
Yeah, certainly staff will be encouraged to wear masks. A lot of staff, I think, will continue to wear masks in the public area. But unvaccinated staff will have that option. I'm sorry. Vaccinated staff, that's a key distinction here. Vaccinated staff will have that option after the state of emergency expires.
Well, one positive out of all of that is the programming, the virtual programming. To be able to, it will maybe be an addition once you get enough people to be able to do both. Now you know how successful it can be and how people respond. That's a great addition.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's a nice problem to have, but you need the staff and the time and all, for the regular programming, but it's a nice problem to have.
You hit the nail right on the head. It's figuring out how to manage capacity. Do you do two versions of the program, one virtual, one in person? Do you decide program by program, what is this better suited for? Do you do just one hybrid in this type of format? So we're going to experiment with all of those until we get it right.
It is what I'm asked about the most is
Story.
in-person programming, and believe it or not, it's children's
Yeah.
in-person programming. Especially for the summer, people are looking for something to do with their children. And I think those folks who, aren't worried about the vaccination, are gonna participate in person, whether their children are vaccinated.
Yeah, the outdoor programming really is a new thing. And Emerald has done a few, and we'll look to do that where we can, but it's not an option. There's really no place here at Northside where that would be. I mean, it's a parking lot basically, so either way, it's not that safe. So yeah, so we have heard requests for programming, and largely it has been questions about story time. That's all I have, Tom.
Thank you. Any other questions from trustees? Comments? Okay, well, thank you, David, for keeping us apprised of the changes there, and I'm sure we will hear about how that all goes at our next meeting. Let's keep the ball in your court, David. We're on to our director's report.
Thank you. I'm pleased to announce, as Marcy scooped earlier, that the Grow Nelson Library Fundraising Committee has been chosen as the winner of the Virginia Library Association's George Mason Award, presented to organizations whose activities have contributed to the development, growth, and extension of library and information services in the local community. So this is a very prestigious award for this group. They were nominated by myself and the branch manager there. This group will be honored with a plaque at the BLA conference this fall, which is an in-person conference at this point in Richmond, October 27th through 29th. So we happen to have two members of that committee here with Marcy and Alita as well. So congratulations to both of you on all your hard work there. Speaking of programming, I pulled some stats for just a few things. Last week here in this room, Northside staff put on a Forgotten History of Penn Park virtual program about the unmarked graves that have been identified in Penn Park that are likely the graves of enslaved individuals. And 95 plus people attended the live online version, and it's up now on YouTube and continuing to rack up hits. So it goes to Wendy's point that hundreds of people, and it's asynchronous, can attend and take advantage of these things. I mentioned the 30 people for the outdoor story time downtown in Charlottesville. The Crozet summer reading kickoff had the Kona ice truck outside in the parking lot, and it was like single serve one. You could come up with your family, get the Kona ice, get your summer reading stuff, and then move along in an assembly line. So it's been fun to try and figure out how to do some programming. A few other things. I wanted to mention that the Friends of the Library are holding a warehouse book sale. July 9th through 11th, 10 to 6 every day. So this is going to be in the Albemarle Square Shopping Center in the site of the original Northside Library. So July 9th through 11th, it's just a weekend, it's just 8 hours a day. Tony's excited. It is not, the full sale with everything that they have available there. It's gonna be very much a warehouse sale, so tables and books on tables. But they have a lot of material because the shutdown happened right before the spring sale last year, and they've continued to accept materials, with a little break throughout. So I think it should be a successful sale, and it didn't really seem possible 6 weeks ago even, but the Friends of Leadership and Peter Mano really worked hard to get to this point. So July 9th through 11th.
David, I
Yes.
know the Friends have their own email list and mailing lists and so forth, but what does the library do to take advantage of the connections we have with community members, so that make sure everybody knows about it?
Likely we'll do two things in this
Yeah.
case. We'll promote it on the library's social media sites, and then we'll do a press release out. It already was in the Daily Progress over the weekend.
Okay.
Because Krista reached out to one of the editors there and added in. So it'll be local media coverage and social media.
I guess signage in the branch, perhaps also.
It's already
There's signage
on.
up.
Yeah.
It's already up. Okay, good.
It's signage is, these days signage is hard because.
It is already,
signage for
the
everything.
background sign, okay.
But yeah, I'm open for any other ideas or suggestions too. The Friends would love to help spread the word within reason. Right? I do not expect that it will be the people lined up around Gordon Avenue that we've had, in the past, but they're also planning an October sale, hopefully close to normal capacity at Gordon Avenue. So maybe by that time we'll be ready for the lines. Two more things just briefly. The city of Charlottesville has already named Carla's replacement. So Carla's on the board through August, basically, and her replacement was named last week. It won't begin until September. It's a local mystery author, Meredith Cole, who the library knows well. She has done programming for JMRL, especially during our big read programs that have to do with mystery themes. So she's a patron of the Central Library, and I think we'll probably be interested in that project, the Central Library project. And the last, just an announcement that the city has changed the auditors for using. So next year, the auditors for JMRL will be Robinson Farmer, Cox and Associates.
Isn't that who we used to use?
It could have been at one point in the past, but it's not who we've had for the last 5 years.
I didn't think.
Contract was up. So that's good. And that's all I have to report. Thomas.
Okay. Any other questions about any of that for David? Okay, well, thank you very much, David. Moving right along, do we have any other matters on the agenda that any board members would like to bring up or staff?
One thing I'll just mention is usually this time of year, the president asks existing trustees and new trustees what committees they're interested in serving on, if they would like to change, the committees that they're serving on. So just wanted to put that out there.
Yes, thank you. I would love to start that discussion. Let's see, we have the 2 changes of seats coming up, so I'm a little unsure of quite where to jump on it because I want to give our new members, as somebody who inherited my committee assignments, I want to make sure that we give everybody an opportunity to reassess what they're doing and make sure that it's the work that engages them the most on the board. So I think for the time being, I might ask if we could to table that and just think amongst yourselves for the month about what work that we do that interests you. I'll send out an email closer to our next board meeting with just a little reminder of the committee assignments and some of the work that they're doing right now. But I'd like to take that as an opportunity for all of us to just reaffirm that we are doing the thing that interests us most on the library board and have a chance to speak up if there's anything else that we would rather be putting our efforts to as volunteers here. So that's a piece of homework for everyone. Just review committees, think a little bit about the work that you've been doing, and if there's anything that really interests you that you'd like to think about doing instead. Any other matters? Any
Yes.
other matters?
There's one other thing that is generally part of our process in July and August, and that is the board self-evaluation. And I don't know how you want to schedule that. There was a suggestion last year that we considered changing the questionnaire to make it more effective as a way of starting conversation about board activities. The crises that we dealt with over the course of this year really put that project on hold.
Sure.
But I think it's worth considering since we are obligated to do a self-evaluation of the board, to figure out a strategy for handling that over the next few months.
That's wonderful. And I do think that those two things go hand in hand very well. An opportunity to evaluate ourselves and the work that we're doing and reassess how we're doing it. Marcy, let me get in touch with you. That wasn't something we talked about at our meeting here in Scottsville the other week. So let me reach out to you after the meeting about picking up whatever materials you have on the evaluations. And if it's okay with the board members, I think we might reuse that form with minimal changes. And at least for the time being, put ourselves through that once more. And I would be happy to undertake the larger edit on that evaluation form over the course of the next year. So we have something a little bit different next summer. Does that sound okay?
Thomas, in the short term, if you'd like, I could reach out to other libraries across the state to see if anybody has a different form that they like that they're using.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, I think, I mean, I remember most of that conversation from last year and some of the troubles that we had with it. So David, that would be very helpful.
Okay.
And I'd be happy to do that. Put a couple of options in front of people if there's something that looks particularly.
But, it doesn't have to be next month, but.
Right. No, I'd like to kind of feel that out because again, I want to make sure we get evaluations from members who are on their way out, just because that is always very helpful and informative. But I want to, I do like the idea of kind of overlapping those two conversations of the committees and the self-evaluation. And I want to make sure that our new members have an opportunity to participate in the former of those two. Thank you all very much. This is the kind of assistance I will be relying on heavily. Okay, any other matters? All right, hearing none, we will move on again in our agenda. Future agenda items. I have, from our discussion here this afternoon, David, it sounded like you might have quotes for us on the exterior hold lockers related to the ARP grant application.
Yes, and basically, I hope to have a budget to submit to you all for the entire grant, including those.
Okay, wonderful. Michael, it sounded like we would be ready for the policy on disposal of library equipment next month, but should we hold off on the other two until July or August?
I think by the time we put together the agenda, a week or 10 days out, I'll be able to tell you.
Okay.
Whether, I think we should present those for a reading, or whether we'll be able to present those for a reading. So
okay.
A couple more weeks on that, I'll
no problem at all. I'll get in touch with you before we do the next agenda. Those were the things that jumped out at me from our discussion. Anything else that we need to put on for next month? Okay, well, hearing none, we have come to our proposed adjournment for the meeting a bit early here. Thank you all very much for putting your faith in me. I like I said, will do my best here and put some faith in the procedures and policies in front of us to just try to march this this process forward. Thank you, Marcy, for everything that you have done for the library in your time here. I'm sorry I can't be there in person to shake your hand and say thank you, but thank you so much.
Yes,
I'm sure.
Together over the board self-evaluation, if that would be helpful.
Absolutely, thank you. That would be very helpful. And let me just say thank you to all of you for volunteering your time and for your patience and thoughtfulness on all of this, to our staff for all of their hard work, as always, their creativity and commitment. And if there is nothing else to come before us this afternoon, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Thank you very much. Second, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, well, let us be adjourned until next month. I'll reach out to those of you about following up on some things for the next agenda and for the self-evaluations, but thank you all again and do take care.
Thanks, Thomas.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much. Thank you.
All right,
Thank
so-
y'all. Good week.
Step down and levels, we could take